Hello folks, this is Sanyam Aggarwal from second year, and today I'll be walking you through the working internals of n8n and AI automation tool. Yeah, so let's dive right into it. Alright, so let's get started with automation. So what exactly is automation? So automation is me dumping all my menial tasks that doesn't really require my attention to my machine. So the task that I had to do repetitively without really having much of a change, I can just ask my computer to do it for me. So, for example, I have a complaint system, and whenever I get a complaint, I have to send a "we will process your complaint shortly" kind of a reply. And if it's a mid-size or large complaint system, it is bound to have so many responses every minute, and I literally can't answer every single one of them. So I can ask my computer to maybe automate this. It will send out a reply whenever it gets a trigger, that is in this case a complaint. Or maybe I hosted an event a few days ago and I'm getting a lot of congratulations mail. So in that case, I don't really want to type a lot of thank you mails. Like for example, I got an email that contains something like congrats. So in that case, I just want to write a thank you email. So a lot of emails with congrats will trigger this function, and well, it will use some template email that I have created for this thank you. Use this template and well, send out an email. Simple, isn't it? Now suppose I have another email. This time it is something that contains the word complaint. In that case, I don't want to send a thank you email, so I'll write another function, and this time we will process it shortly kind of a reply. So two types of mails, two types of functions, because two types of responses. So isn't it leading to somewhere else? Like suppose I get now another sort of email like you have won a prize money. I have to create another function for it. So the infinite number of possibilities that I will have different categories of emails. So I can't really write infinite number of functions for it, isn't it? If I have so many number of functions, my server is going to crash really. My machine won't work actually. So automation without AI, isn't it too much restricted? Like really restricted. So in that case I'll be like, oh come on, just delete this function. Like which century is this? We have our AI models like this chat GPT, isn't it a great thing? So now I'll introduce AI in my workflow, and I'll just call it AI workflow. Pretty much name gives out what it does. So I get an email, I just pass into it my chatbot, and well, this chatbot will process it, and let's say I want to flag it if it's a bot email or not a bot email. If it's not a bot email, I want you to generate some response. Like we were doing writing functions for that, but now in this case this model is standalone and will generate the responses. Once it has generated the responses, I'll pass it on to some function, but this function would be like simply like get response from LLM and will send the email, and boom, our email was sent just like that. I'm not restricted by the number of functions, and it's quite easy and convenient, and it's more liberal, more free, and less restricted. I don't really have to restrict myself to the function that I've created. I have got a lot of possibilities, but it's still lacking somewhere, isn't it? Like, I feel like there's something missing. So this makes us to go to even advanced topic, and that is an AI agent. So what exactly is an AI agent? Let's dive right into it. Alright, so AI agents. So what are exactly AI agents? They are nothing but an extension of a workflow. Well, extension in what means? So AI agent is more autonomous. That is, the human supervision is quite less as compared to a workflow. And the main decision maker is not a human but a reasoning engine. So what exactly does this mean? So let's compare with the previous example that we had taken for an AI workflow. So here it was like I was telling the machine what to do. If I have this sort, I have received some output, I will pass it into an AI model, and then again I would tell it if it's a bot generated email, reject that, like don't reply. If it is not a bot generated email, then you have to generate an output reply. And when I got that reply, I again tell myself that I have to send the email. So here my intervention is like quite extended. But what if I replace, like, okay, I if I remove myself from every stage, like I won't intervene at every stage, that send an email, check it's or not, but I just keep an AI engine at the core, and I'll ask it that, oh hey, this I your job is to now get the emails and generate some replies. It's your choice, however you do it. So now it has multiple approaches that it can use. Maybe it can, you know, generate output using one model and then use another model to act as a critique and evaluate its performance. And if it deems it's like all right to send a reply, well, just do your job. Now I don't have to tell you that check for bots and all that. But it's still not much very clear. So let's take another example. So suppose I have an AI agent that will label images for me. So I'll ask it, okay, your job is to just label everything you can see on this image and maybe try to find out where this image is from or whatever you have to do. So in that case, well, it would be able to, label these images. It's a sun, it's a person, snow, then there are trees, the mountains. But what about finding out which location this image is from? So in that case, it requires access to internet maybe, because I don't think LLMs are trained good enough to maybe predict the geographical locations without actually, having access to some vector databases or any sort of databases. So in that case, if it were a workflow, it would have been hard to, write a web scraping script to scrape everything that could be related to this image and then pass those contents to the model to evaluate which is the closest matched location. So in this case, having AI agents really is a lot of help, because now you don't have to write those scripts, you don't have to write those functions, you don't have to intervene at every step. Your AI agent is going to do everything. All right, so as we have gained some basic insights about terms like automation, workflow, and AI agents, let's move on to our main agenda, and that is n8n, which is an open source workflow automation tool. So, what exactly n8n does is that it orchestrates the complete pipeline of creating the AI workflows or the agentic workflows that we have talked about. So, what exactly do I mean by saying that it is used to orchestrate the pipeline? So, basically, you create the workflows and then you host the workflows through n8n. So, talking about hosting, there are multiple ways that you can host an n8n workflow. That is, you can use n8n servers or some hosting service like Hostinger, but it's like costly, so you could prefer self-hosting as well, but because self-hosting is not the main idea of concern for us, let's not dig deeper into it and move on with how actually n8n works behind the scenes. Alright, so let's try to understand how n8n works internally with the help of this workflow instance that I have with me. And there's one thing to know that n8n works with special architecture known as node-based architecture. And what exactly does it mean is that it considers a workflow as a graph representation of sorts. So basically what you see here, or these boxes actually represent nodes, and these are some breakpoints or services that are present in my workflow. For example, the LLM model, the memory, Microsoft OneDrive as a service, Microsoft Teams as a service, all are nodes. Check if bot, it's a conditional break, is also a node in my workflow. So these are nodes, and these nodes are connected with some directed arrows, and these arrows actually represent the flow of data or action control in my workflow. So what we see here is the starting node, which is called a trigger node, and conversely, we could say that a trigger node is always the starting node of an AI workflow. So these trigger nodes are of various types like error node, Slack trigger, email trigger. But most common trigger that I have noticed in most of the workflow is a webhook trigger. So we'll look into what a webhook is later on. But let's see how the AI agent works in this workflow. So this AI agent has basically the OpenAI chat model as its reasoning model. So as we have talked about that, an LLM model is basically the main decision maker in an AI agentic workflow. So most of the decision would be carried out by this chat model here, as it's clearly represented in this workflow. So another feature of an AI agentic workflow is that it has access to some memory. And most probably, I will store all my context that I want to feed in my LLM model here. So to say in common words, the rules that I want for my auto-generated content. So moving on to the services that I've provided it as access is that Microsoft OneDrive and Microsoft Teams and some other tools which it has access to. So what basically I could try to infer that this workflow does is that whenever it receives some sort of DMs, that is, I receive some sort of DMs, my workflow gets activated. And if you look closely, it posts this message to see if it's a bot generated DM or not. So if it is a bot generated DM, it does nothing. But if it is a human generated content, it is passed on to AI agent, which then passes this message to my LLM model along with the rules that I've stored in my memory as some context feeding. So what exactly is context feeding is that I want to like have some basic control on how the content is generated. Suppose I have received some sort of mail from my superior in work, so I have to keep a more polite and professional tone. But supposingly I have got an email from my colleague, like a junior colleague, so I don't need to be too polite or formal. I can have some leniency in my generated content. So this is what memory is doing, or maybe whenever it sees some uh, schedule event being present in the DM. So I want it to store that in my OneDrive, as maybe I want it to store the schedule in my calendar. So like all of the rules that I want to give my AI agent are stored here. Then OneDrive, maybe I want to attach some uh, visuals or documents to my reply, so it has access to OneDrive. Teams, maybe I have to join a meeting, which I've been informed through my DMs. So Microsoft One Teams. So this is how basically this workflow is functioning. But we have one more thing to understand, and that is the event driven architecture of n8n workflows. And this is where webhooks comes into play. So let's explore what are webhooks now. Now let's just suppose we have two services at different locations A and B, and we want them to communicate over the network. So there are multiple ways in which we can achieve this. So for instance, let's say I have some message in B that I want to pass on to A, and I just sent it. And now I want to receive some reply from A. So how would I know that I have a response from A? And so one method is that I continuously ask A if there is some response for me, and this is what we know call as constant polling. Uh, but there are some clear disadvantages of this um, method, and what are these? So it's first of all very cost expensive. Like we have to maintain a communication channel line from A to B until we receive a response. So let's say I have sent some response to my colleague who has boarded a plane that when he reaches the destination he should reply me. So let's say the flight is like 10 hour long. Like maintaining a communication line for 10 hours is really resource expensive and really not necessary. Also, because communication lines are limited, communication lines have to be reserved for a task that is not even confirmed if it would be like executed, or if I would be getting a response. So it's like we really wasted of time as well as your resources, the money and all that stuff. So when our workflows, that is in our workflows, when we don't even know that we want to trigger a workflow or not, in that case constant polling is really not a very good trigger for our workflows. So what we will use in our workflows is something called as webhook. So now instead of continuously asking like a that it has some response for me or not, what I'll do is that I'll have a connection which we call as a webhook connection. So what exactly is that in there is that instead of B asking A, it has some response for B. It would be simply like whenever A gets a response that it has to send it to B, it will tell okay B, I have some response for you stored in this URL. So it will tell it that this is the URL. So you should just go and grab the response there. So the communication line that was being reserved in constant pooling would not be reserved in the webhook. A connection would be established whenever A has some response for B, and well, it will send a small signal to B that come on, get your response, and well, B will get it. So in a situation where workflow has to be activated when we meet some special conditions, a trigger node should be a workflow where it gets a trigger or a response that of course now you can get activated or you can start the workflow. So in that case, instead of running a workflow all throughout 24/7, it will get triggered only when it receives some trigger, or that is in case of webhook connection. So this is what is webhook simplified. There is one more thing that we use in our workflows, and that is an API. So what is an API? There are two basic things that you have to understand is that one is an API call where you request from for some resources from like B requests some resources to A, and it fetches like it fetches some data that is responses in this situation. So APIs in our n8n workflows are basically the services like the OneDrive service or the Microsoft Teams service that we were seeing. So we implement these basically through external API integrations. So let's look how APIs are different from webhook now. So I have this diagram. We have discussed about webhook, so we don't really need to explore this. So webhook versus an API. So in this case, I'll constantly ask my service provider for the data I'm looking for. In this case, I'm like continuously asking it for data. So I call an API to this service, and then gives me some sort of resource that I'm asking for. But in case of webhooks, like the service itself will notify me that I have this data. So in case where like I want to have some like, so let's say I want to get my schedule stored in the calendar. So in that case, I won't ask calendar, okay, is there a schedule for me like next day? So the calendar would not itself notify me. I have to ask the calendar. In that case, instead of webhook, API seems to be the right call. Like you see, API requires constant pooling because we call API explicitly, and we expect that a response is already present there for the service provider. Constant pooling seems to be like more efficient because let's say if I'm asking for some schedule in my calendar, it would be that I have some schedules, or I don't have two schedules. I don't have to wait for 10 hours or 20 hours to get that response. So in that case, constant pooling just instantly gives out the result. So whenever I have to access some other services, APIs are better because like you want to get the output instantly. You don't have to wait for some trigger or URL to get it. And in that case, if the connection, that API call is successful, you are able to fetch some data. And if the call fails, and this fetching process also fails. So this is what an API and a webhook is, and I hope this is actually clear to you. We will not delve too much into the technical aspects of this. So this is it from me, and I hope your curiosity has been intrigued about AI agents and AI workflows. So yeah, thank you.